When I awoke, my mother was rushing about getting ready for our guests. She always had to be the socialite. I guess a dead daughter was a good enough reason for a dinner party. I tried to avoid her the best I could. I did this weird little tiptoe run into the kitchen, snatched a Pop-Tart, and darted out while she was fussing with decorations in the dining room. By the time I gathered enough courage to show my face to her, she had set up 2 more tables in the backyard. She glanced at me. "I hope it doesn't rain," she said, squinting at the graying clouds. "You never know in Texas," I mumbled, crossing my arms. I stared at the sky along with her. I hoped it did rain. "I'll have to ask the decorators to get some tents." She fluttered her arms back towards the door. I went inside with her at my heels. "So what do you think?" I shrugged, taking in the crystals and flowers. "It looks a bit celebratory," I grumbled. "Oh, it is. We are celebrating Helena's life, not mourning it." "Is that what we're doing?" "Stop being so snide, Ophelia." She waved at me in an air of frustration. I sighed. "How many people are we having over anyway?" She looked around, making a tick noise with her tongue, thinking. "We have enough for 30. 10 in the dining room, 20 outside. If there is more, we can scrounge up some spare seating, and this banquet is for only family and close friends." Ooh, the great Rebecca Grant doing something moderately small. Shocker. "Ophelia," she warned, giving me her ugly, angry squint. "Oh, you know it's true, Mom," I sighed. "Where's Jack and Max?" "Jack took your brother for breakfast." I sighed. "And of course they didn't offer me." "You were asleep." I turned to go to my room. "Wait, Ophelia." I glanced at her. "I need you to call your father." I groaned. "Don't. He and I don't get along, you know that. I need to know if he's coming to the funeral or not. Mom, Dad wasn't even at the visitation. I don't think he's coming." "I talked to him last week and he said he'd be here." "Well then where is he? I don't see him." He couldn't give less of a fuck. "Language, young lady," Mom snapped. "Now get upstairs and call your father." I spun and rushed to my room, my chest burning in hot anger. My father had been absent since him and my mom divorced 10 years prior. Our talks were occasional, and his live appearances were even rarer. The last time I'd seen him in person was my 14th birthday. I'd been so happy when he showed up. He, Hunter, and I all spent the day at the state fair, all the way in Dallas. It had been one of the greatest days of my life. He'd promised that he was going to change. He swore to visit more and call more frequently. Hunter and I had believed him, and for a while he had. But a few weeks later he got arrested for possession of marijuana. Fucking fabulous, right? He was chunked in jail for 6 months, was under probation for another few months. The contact almost stopped after that. Now, 4 fucking years later, he owed it to Hunter to show up and repay his respects to his daughter. I tapped my dad's contact in my phone and pressed it to my ear. Had my mom not talked to him a few days ago, I would have been concerned that he had changed his number. Ring, ring, ring. I held my breath. I don't know why I felt nervous. I didn't want to be nervous. I was angry, and I wanted to just be angry. But the childish part of me took over. I hadn't spoken with my father in maybe a year. It wasn't like I had anything to say to him. My sister was dead, and I expected to see him at the funeral. That was all. However, the innocent part of me that remembered him caring about the little girl I used to be just wanted to speak to him. She wanted to understand. She wanted him to understand. She wanted to confide in him about all that her mother had done in his absence. She wanted to sob and cry because of the fact that her sister was no longer there. I wanted that. As much as I needed to hate him, he was still my daddy. Had I made that phone call at any other time, it would have been easy for me to be the numb machine that I normally was. Hunter's death had broken me down, however. It had reminded me that I was indeed human and humans were fragile. I needed someone, and it was clearly not going to be my mother. I needed him. Ring. I bit my tongue, suddenly shifting from "please don't pick up" to "for the love of God, answer." Ring. "Hey," a voice boomed on the other line. I sighed in relief. "Dad," I uttered, biting the inside of my cheek. I felt my heart swell with reprieve. "This is Leo, but you just missed me. Make sure to leave a message and I'll get back to you. Beep." I physically felt my heart sink. My mouth went numb, and I could feel tears edging my eyes. I thought I was just going to break down right there. I thought I was going to scream and cry and break things out of sheer grief. But then my anger snapped in. Anger at my father. "Yeah," I growled into the receiver. "This is your daughter. No, not the dead one. Ophelia. Ozzy. Remember me? No? Well, maybe you remember Hunter, and the fact that her funeral is today. You haven't fucking called me to see how I'm holding up. You haven't shown up on our doorstep with a hug for your grieving daughter. You didn't even come to Hunter's visitation. What kind of piece of shit father are you? You can't even answer my calls. Hell, how do I not know you're not homeless and living in a damn cardboard box? That's right, you talked to my mom, but not me. Where the hell are you?" I took a breath, trying to calm myself and get my point across. "You owed it to her to be here, and you're not going to be. Just..." I fucking broke, tears spilling over my cheeks. "Fuck you, Dad." I hung up the phone and tossed it across the room into my laundry basket, luckily allowing it not to break. I wasn't able to keep it in anymore, and I just flung my face into my pillow and screamed. The tears streamed from my face, soaking my muffle. I kicked and smashed my fists. I cursed the world for taking me from her. I asked why. I bargained my life for hers. But ultimately, I was left alone in my room, completely shattered and crying myself into a quiet sleep. I think it was my body's safety mechanism. I didn't know how to handle that much grief in one moment, so it just shut off. I don't know what I would have done if it hadn't have happened like that. Hell, I may have thrown myself from my window or slit my wrists. I don't know. I do know that with the rest came peace, and when I awoke, I was able to carry on. Mom shook me awake at around noon. "Ophelia," she said my name loudly in my ear. What?" I mumbled, tumbling over to face her. She stared at me for a long minute, a foray of expression crossing her face. Then she frowned and sighed. "You look terrible, Ophelia." I pushed my hair out of my face. It had stuck against my skin with my tears. I can only imagine how shitty I actually looked. "We have to leave in an hour and a half, and you need to get ready." My mom's hair was wrapped up in a towel on top of her head. A few damp brown strands had escaped to rest against her powdered cheek. Her eyes were decorated with beige eyeshadow and black eyeliner. Her lips were her trademark red. "You want me to do your makeup?" she asked. I was a little shocked at both the offer and the gentleness in her voice. I guess even she could tell how close to the edge I was, and she didn't want to push me over. I had to force my jaw closed. No, thanks though." She half smiled, a smile that reminded me of my childhood. "No black eyeshadow today, okay?" I shook my head. At first, I was gonna argue with her. Black looked best on me. However, I wanted to keep this odd piece for as long as I could. I nodded. "Okay, Mom." She patted my hand and leaned away. "Hurry up," she called as she walked from my room. I sat there in my wreck of a bed for a few minutes before I had the strength to drag myself to my feet. My body ached all over and I felt weak in general. My head was pounding, my eyes were sore, and my throat was dry. Getting into my bathroom was a workout all on its own, and by the time I made the 6-foot trek, I was exhausted. I popped an aspirin and chugged a glass of water in anticipation of looking in the mirror. I was sure I looked like hell come to earth, and I was not looking forward to having to correct all that mess. I took a steadying breath and looked at myself. Boy, was I right. My black hair was in knots all over my head, sticking up like spikes in random places. My cheeks were red and raw looking. My eyes were all puffy and swollen with red and whites. My lips had the same swelled effect. My left jaw had a red mark where I'd slept on my arm. Fuck, I whined. I went about my work. First, I combed out my tangles and plugged in my straightener. While it was warming, I did my makeup. As my mom asked, I didn't use black eyeshadow. Instead, I used a shimmery silver powder I had and lined it with a wide black wingtip. Hunter had been the one to teach me how to do makeup. It was a fond memory, and one that came to mind as I decorated my face for her funeral. She had taught me a lot of things. Even though she was only 2 years older than me, she had filled my mother's role a lot of the time. I don't know who had taught her. TV maybe, or perhaps she had learned it on her own. I had never asked or never told her thank you. It was just one of those things that I hadn't really realized was such a privilege until it wasn't an option anymore. She and I had been so much alike. She'd gotten me into everything that I liked. She was the reason I was who I was. I wasn't sure at the time if I really liked who that had made me become. I wondered if Hunter had grown out of it, or if that had been just her. If she had, could I? And if she hadn't, was I always just emulating her? I had noted the change in her appearance. I hadn't seen her when she was alive, but her blonde hair was a hint to the shift. When she had left, her hair was a dark auburn pixie cut. But when I looked at her the previous day, it had been her natural blonde and long. She and I had dyed our hair together. We had done it because Mother had liked the idea of having little blonde schoolgirls. We couldn't let her have what she wanted, of course, so I went black and she went red. We had both cut it the same, but I had let mine grow out over time. I kept the color, however. I remember thinking as I straightened my hair, maybe I'll go back natural too. That was a time that I questioned myself a lot. After about 45 minutes of work, I was finally presentable. I wore a tight black dress with lace as the collar and sleeves, with the same boots from the day before. "I'm ready," I called, moving downstairs into the living room. "Mom!" Mom darted out of the kitchen, dragging Maxwell by his hand. Jack followed her out. "About time," my stepfather hissed. "Come along, Ophelia," Mom called after me as they trailed out the front door. I moved to the doorway before pausing. I had to take a breath to steady myself. The funeral was going to be hard, and I had to take solace in the last bit of calm that I had. "Ophelia!" my mom called impatiently. I sighed and shut the door behind me.